Good morning, everybody. So, happy, is it Wednesday, right? Happy Wednesday? Yeah. May 8th already. Oh my goodness. Whew. This year is already flying by. My goodness. It's amazing how when you get older, things just seem to happen faster. It's very bizarre. When you're a kid, you just want nothing more than to become an adult, right? Just so you can do all the good stuff. And then once you get old enough to do all the good stuff, you're like, why did I want this again? Yeah. Well, thanks for joining me today on this happy Wednesday. Today, I just wanted to talk about the latest Windows announcement by Microsoft that they're going to include a full Linux kernel. That's right, cats and dogs playing nicely. It's just amazing. Well, yesterday, it was announced at the event, the build event that Microsoft puts on every year, that there's going to be a Linux distribution included with Windows 10. Now, it's something that you're going to have to go and actually get from the Windows Store, like you currently can with the current version of Windows subsystem for Linux. But this time it's going to be kind of updated to full Linux kernel, which is absolutely amazing. That's crazy. I can't even fathom how weird this is for a lot of us that are, we're Microsoft developers. We've been living in the Microsoft world for a long time. And you're just seeing this about face by Microsoft since Satya Nadella took over is just absolutely amazing. Again, don't forget your coffee. So, back in the day, Steve Ballmer made a very famous saying that, open source is a cancer. And now, we talk about an about face. You've got Microsoft basically embracing the Linux kernel and embracing it as something you can actually include in Windows 10. Right now, the current version of Windows subsystems for Linux is pretty limited in its ability. It's not that terrific. It's mostly just kind of a bash terminal for doing some stuff. You can build some applications for it and run some things. But this is pretty amazing what they're doing with it now. Now, what kind of impact does that have on the normal, average, everyday person? It probably not a lot at first, but it does mean kind of a lot for us developers because we now can essentially run a full Linux machine inside of our Windows 10, and we can go back and forth between the two without having to have some sort of virtual machine version of Linux. So this new kernel that Microsoft is releasing is based upon 4.19, which is the latest stable release of the Linux kernel. It is going to be GPL licensed and open sourced. So that means that all patches and updates are going to be published publicly. They're going to be available publicly. You can also, I imagine, depending upon where they do it, I'm almost certain they're going to put it on their platform of GitHub. But that means that you can start doing pull requests, and you can build you can build your own operating systems and distros off of their Linux kernel. So it was written from scratch by Microsoft, so they started completely fresh with it. They didn't take it from somewhere else and rebuild it. They actually just did this by scratch, which is also kind of a feat in and of itself. But I guess there's a lot of people that would say, oh, no, I can do that. Which, to me, it's amazing when people can just write an operating system like this. And I know the Linux kernel, when it was originally being done, was very small, actually. It was not a lot of lines. I forget how many lines of code, but it was only a couple thousand, I think, when it was first done, or something like that. Some outlandish low number of, maybe it was 10,000 lines. So, some really outlandishly low number of lines of code to run the original Linux that Linus came up with. So, all right, so It will run in a virtual machine. So which to me has some impact, and I'm kind of curious about how this is going to work as far as memory and resource consumption. But they say it boots up a lot faster because of this, because it's going to be. I think they're going to just be utilizing the hypervisor in order to spin up some sort of subsystem where Linux is going to be running. The small little tiny kernel is going to be running in the background when you tell it to start up, right? So it's not going to start automatically with Windows. It's not going to already be running. You have to kind of go and open it and then tell it to run, and it'll boot up. But it's going to boot up incredibly fast. The other thing is, so this is kind of cool. It's going to support Docker containers. That's, full Linux Docker containers. It's going to have access to all of your hardware drivers. So if you have a Linux hardware driver, you can use that. So you can actually work with some of the hardware peripherals on your system using Linux. The updates will be pushed through Windows Updates. So, you don't have to do anything special to go get the newer versions or new pushes for updates. It's built right into Windows Updates, which is going to be very, very convenient. So the original system, subsystem for Linux that Windows provided for us, I don't know if anybody's seen this, but you can do this just by going to, let me pull up. If you go to the Windows store, and you can just do a search for Ubuntu, and you will get, where is it? Maybe, I thought it would be under Ubuntu, but maybe it's under something else. Let me try Linux. There we go. So you can get the Ubuntu, you can get the 18.0 LTS, you can do the Kali Linux. There's you can get some stuff to run already as a Linux, but it's not the full kernel, right? It's just basically a terminal that's kind of a special little terminal to run Linux commands. That's the original Windows subsystems for Linux. And it's okay. It's pretty good. I mean, I think it was kind of like hey, we're really trying to embrace Linux. We're trying to embrace open source. But this move to have it be a complete kernel means a lot more access to things and a lot more ability to do things. So I think that's really, really cool. Let's see what else. So, okay, it also means that you're going to have full system access with Linux distros. So you can do a full Linux distro. You can do Ubuntu, you can do Debian, you can do Kali, OpenSUSE, or SUSE. I don't know. Some people pronounce it differently. OpenSUSE, SysLinux. There's even reports of a Fedora, which is Red Hat distro, but not officially supported by Red Hat, is what I understand. And then, to me, one of the bigger questions here is, what does this mean for Android development? Right? What does this mean for Android? Because it seems to me, I've already seen that you can already build Android. You can already have an Android operating system running on your Windows 10 using their current WSL. But I think this is going to bring it to a whole new level, because I think that what it means is you can probably get to the point where you could just simply run Android applications natively. I think that's what we're getting to. The ability to just simply have an Android version. Like we've been dealing with Android Studio, loading Android Studio on your computer. You could do that, and you could run an Android simulated phone on your computer in Windows 10. However, I think this takes it to a next level. I think this is going to be making it available for you to just essentially make a new Android instance, run it up, run it as an instance, and then see it inside of a window that's going to be kind of native to Windows 10. I think that's where we could eventually go. Somebody's going to probably take that ability and run with it. I really think so. How long it's going to take for somebody to do that, I don't know. Maybe it's even Google that does it. We might see Google make some sort of move in that direction to try to embrace the Microsoft developers amongst us, right? The Windows 10 developers amongst us, the ones that don't necessarily always want to run an Apple or a Linux computer. We like our Windows 10 operating system for a multitude of reasons. I think it's definitely worth them possibly pursuing a way to have the Android operating system run so you can just run Android applications natively inside of Windows 10, which Microsoft has been saying that you're going to be able to do in Windows 10. They've been saying that you could do that. So I'm interested to see how quickly this becomes a reality. So I wanted to show you guys a quick little demonstration video I found. So let me just pop this up. So this is just a little demo. So we'll just take a look at how fast this thing boots up. It just goes, this is towards the end of this. But this is basically just the bash shell command line, right? So boot, clicks on Ubuntu, it takes 4 seconds to load. Actually, probably less than that because it doesn't include the click, right? So he's just going to start a Docker container and called Alpine. And there it is, just like that. So in just a few seconds, you're able to run an application in Linux on Docker. Like this is boot up Docker and then run a container. That's crazy. That's and this is all native. Get there in under 20 seconds. Wow. 22 seconds, something like that. That's crazy. To boot up the Ubuntu, which will be the Linux kernel, just to boot it up and then run Docker, then run a Docker container and execute a command on that container. Unbelievable. Anyway, okay, so that's pretty cool. Yeah, crazy stuff. So the one last thing I wanted to point out today about this whole thing was actually, let's go through the announcement that was done by Microsoft. Because I think there's some good little pieces of information some of you guys might want to know about all this. So beginning with the Windows Insider builds this summer, they're going to be including an in-house custom-built Linux kernel to underpin the newest version of Windows subsystem for Linux. So that's what they were talking about, right? No longer is it just the simple WSL, bash command line essentially that we got. It's going to be full Linux kernel, which means Linux applications, Linux distros. You'll be able to run. I imagine you'll be able to run multiple versions of like Node. Run one on your Windows computer and run one on Linux, etc. I don't know how many. I don't know. There seems to be a lot of possibilities here with this. We will generally come through installation via the Windows Store, but can be sideloaded through the creation of a custom distribution package. So you can make your own custom distribution of for the Linux kernel. The only exception to this rule is a small init script that is injected to Bootstrap in the startup process, forming the connections between Windows and Linux that make WSL so magical. Obviously, they need to have some sort of connection between the two systems so that Windows will grant the access to the different peripherals and drives and hardware on your computer, right? The kernel itself will initially be based on version 4.19, the latest long-term stable release of Linux. The kernel will be rebased at the designation of a new long-term stable release to ensure that the WSL kernel always has the latest Linux goodness. In addition to the LTS source from kernel.org, a number of local patches are being applied. These patches tune the resulting binary for the use in WSL 2 by improving launch times, reducing the memory footprint, and curating a minimal set of supported devices. The result is a small, lightweight kernel that is purpose-built for WSL 2 to be dropped in as a replacement to the emulation architect feature of the original design of WSL 1. So it was an emulator before. This time it's going to be a full kernel. Um, so let's see, an important philosophy. Yep. So important philosophy of Linux at Microsoft is that all changes go upstream. Maintaining downstream patches adds complexity as not standard practice in the open source community. In leveraging Linux, we are making a commitment to be good citizens and contribute back the changes that we make. So they're going to contribute to the Linux, to Linux. So not only are they going to be just kind of making their own version of this, but they're actually going to be continuing to contribute to the Linux community. However, during development, it is necessary to work with local patches that enable new features or address issues in upstream. In these cases, we will either create or find patches that fulfill our product requirements and then work with the community to get that code integrated as soon as possible, which makes sense, right? Like if you have a specific issue with your Windows 10 environment that they can build a patch for, it doesn't necessarily make sense to immediately push that through on the Linux distro, right? That really wouldn't make sense. Let's see if we can get some of these things integrated with Linux natively after we come up with some patches, right? And let's work with them in order to try to integrate some of those things. But let's just not force the issue. Let's not just say, okay, Linux, you now need to support us, right? That's a pretty substantial mentality shift, right? No longer is it, we're Microsoft, you guys have to do what we say. It's, oh, you guys have Linux as your, you guys are running and operating Linux. We want to contribute to that. And if we have some sort of significant problem within our Windows environment that's running this Linux kernel, we're going to find the patch, build the patch, and then petition you guys to include some of that in the next Linux distro. That's a very bold shift from the past. I think that the opinion of Microsoft now amongst developers has got to be making a shift, right? People have to start to look at this and say, this is not the same Microsoft I grew up with, right? This is not the browser wars of Microsoft or the .NET development scheme, which initially .NET was supposed to be open source, but they had some issues with that. It really was, but there just wasn't any. The internet wasn't as big back then. Okay, so it will be using Microsoft's world-class CI/CD system and serviced through Windows updates in an operation transparent to the user. The kernel will stay up to date with the newest features and fixes in the latest stable branch of Linux. There's some really good stuff in here. I definitely highly recommend you guys check it out. I'll send a couple links in the description below this video so you guys can check it out. But it's just amazing that we are really entering this world of everybody's getting along. And I think it's just in an effort to capture all the developers because the content is king, right? Content is king. You can provide a platform, but if you don't have content for that platform, what good is your platform? Okay, I'm going to let you guys get to work. I got to get to work. I hope you guys do have a wonderful day. Do please click on that link, though. Try to make a link to coffeewithsteve.info, and you'll get the little pop-up message that says, we think this isn't good. Tell us why you think it should be allowed. And do that for me just to see what kind of response you get. All right, thanks, guys. Hope you guys have a wonderful day.